The building inspector arrived at 8 a.m. sharp on December 23rd, just as Karen had arranged. She watched from her living room window as Rick's colleague, a stern man named Patterson, approached Dave's house with his clipboard and authority. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "Safety violation. No permits for electrical work of this magnitude. Festival over." But something was wrong. Instead of the immediate shutdown she'd expected, Patterson was shaking Dave's hand, laughing even. He spent 20 minutes examining the display, taking pictures, and chatting with Dave like they were old friends. Karen's phone rang. "Karen, it's Patterson. About that Thompson situation you flagged." "Yes. What violations did you find?" "Well, that's the thing. Everything's completely up to code. More than up to code, actually. The guy's got a master electrician's license, did his own work, pulled all the proper permits back in October. He's actually got one of the safest electrical setups I've ever seen. Professional-grade equipment, proper grounding, backup safety systems. It's like he knew someone would come looking for violations." The phone slipped from Karen's numb fingers. Dave had planned this. All of it. She stumbled outside, not caring that she was still in her bathrobe, and marched straight to Dave's house. He was in his front yard adjusting a spotlight, wearing a Santa hat and humming Silver Bells. "You knew," she said. "You planned this whole thing." Dave turned, his expression shifting from cheerful to something harder. "Karen, Merry Christmas to you too. The permits, the professional equipment. You baited me. I responded to your aggression appropriately." Dave set down his tools. "You know what your real mistake was, Karen? You assumed I was just some suburban dad who didn't know his rights." "What are you talking about?" 20 years as an electrical contractor, 10 years on my old neighborhood's HOA board before I moved here. I know exactly how people like you operate." His voice was calm, measured. "You pick on people you think can't fight back. You use rules as weapons instead of tools for community building." Karen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December morning. "You manipulated me. I gave you multiple opportunities to be reasonable. You chose escalation every single time." Dave gestured toward his house, where early visitors were already arriving. "Look around, Karen. This isn't about Christmas lights anymore. This is about what kind of community we want to live in. I was protecting property values, maintaining standards. You were throwing your weight around because you could." Dave's expression softened slightly. "Karen, do you know what's happened to our neighborhood in the past 3 weeks? Mrs. Chen down the street. Her husband Bob mentioned she's been struggling since her cancer diagnosis. The festival raised enough money to cover her treatment copays. The Johnson's kid got into college, but they couldn't afford the deposits. Covered. The Williams family, their house fire last month, completely covered by donations from festival visitors." Karen stared at him, speechless. Outside, the festival continued. Lights twinkling like stars, families laughing, children singing along to Christmas carols. It was magical, beautiful, and exactly the kind of thing that made communities special. Karen closed her blinds and began planning her counterattack. 3 days later, Karen sat in her Mercedes in the parking lot of Peterson and Associates law firm, hands shaking as she dialed the city's code enforcement hotline for the 4th time. "Ma'am, as I explained before, if the decorations meet electrical safety codes and don't violate noise ordinances, there's nothing we can. There are over 3,000 people on my street right now." Karen shrieked. 3,000? They're selling hot chocolate. There's a Santa meet and greet. Someone set up a food truck. The chaos had escalated beyond her worst nightmares. Dave's Festival of Lights had morphed into an actual festival. Local businesses were sponsoring displays. The high school marching band performed nightly at 7 p.m. Someone had organized a charity drive that had already raised $30,000 for the children's hospital. And every single news story painted Karen as the villain. "HOA Grinch tries to steal Christmas," read the morning headlines. Her photo, a particularly unflattering one from the HOA newsletter, was being shared across social media with captions like "Peak Karen Energy" and "Why HOAs are Evil." She'd hired Margaret Peterson, the most ruthless attorney in the county, but even Margaret seemed skeptical. "Karen, I have to ask, Are you sure you want to pursue this? The optics are challenging. I don't care about optics. I care about property values and community standards. That man has turned our neighborhood into a carnival. Margaret flipped through the thick folder of evidence Karen had compiled. These photos are extensive. You've been documenting this for days. Every violation, every breach of protocol. Look at Exhibit C, unauthorized commercial activity. Exhibit F, noise violations after 9 p.m. Exhibit J, improper signage. Karen, Margaret said gently, I think you need to consider that this might be bigger than HOA bylaws now. Dave Thompson has become something of a folk hero. People are calling him the Christmas light champion. There's a GoFundMe to help pay his HOA fines that's raised over $40,000. Karen felt her world tilting. What GoFundMe? Margaret turned her laptop around. The page showed Dave grinning next to his light display, with the title Help Dave Fight HOA Tyranny. The donation total kept climbing as they watched. He's using my fines to fund more decorations, Karen whispered, horrified. It appears so. And Karen, there's something else. Channel 7 wants to interview you tonight. They're doing a special segment called Christmas in Crisis. Karen's phone buzzed with another unknown number. She'd stopped answering calls yesterday when reporters started calling her personal line. But this text message made her blood freeze. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Brad Hoffman from Netflix Documentary Films. We're producing a feature about your situation with Dave Thompson. Would you be available for an on-camera interview? We think your perspective is crucial to telling the full story. Netflix. They were making a documentary about her. About this. I need to stop this, Karen muttered, standing abruptly. Whatever it takes. Karen, wait. But she was already storming out of the office, her mind racing with increasingly desperate plans. Legal action was too slow. The media had turned against her. The other board members were wavering. Bob had actually suggested they embrace the community spirit, and Linda had been photographed buying hot chocolate at Dave's booth. She drove home through streets clogged with Christmas light tourists, past Dave's house where a local news crew was interviewing a family from Michigan who'd driven 6 hours just to see the display. The father was telling the reporter how beautiful it was to see a community come together, while his children posed with Dave's inflatable reindeer. That night, Karen made 2 phone calls that would define the rest of the story. The first was to her brother Rick, who worked for the county's building inspection department. Rick, I need a favor. A big one. Karen, I've been watching the news. Are you sure you want tow? Just tell me, if someone were to have electrical work done without permits, that would require immediate shutdown for safety reasons, right? The long pause told her everything she needed to know. The second call was to a private investigator she'd found online. I need everything you can find on David Thompson. Financial records, employment history, social media, everything. I'm particularly interested in any irregularities. As she hung up, Karen caught her reflection in her darkened window. For just a moment, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her, eyes wild, hair disheveled, surrounded by stacks of HOA violation notices and legal documents. But Dave Thompson had pushed her too far. If he wanted to play games, she'd show him what real power looked like. But here's the thing, Dave continued. I never intended for it to go this far. I was going to take down the extra lights after Christmas, pay your silly fine, and move on. Then you doubled down. Then you tripled down. Then you tried to get me shut down on false pretenses. You were just drunk on the tiny amount of power you have over your neighbors' lives. Dave picked up his tools. So now we have a choice, Karen. We can end this war you started, or we can keep going. But I should mention, Netflix offered me a development deal this morning. Turns out America loves an underdog story about standing up to petty tyrants. Karen's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Here's my offer, Dave said. You officially withdraw all fines and citations. You apologize to the community for the disruption. And next year, instead of patrolling for violations, you'll organize a proper neighborhood festival. Everyone wins. And if I refuse? Dave smiled, but it wasn't entirely friendly. Then you'll find out just how far this can escalate. The documentary comes out. The book deal I've been offered goes through, and your name becomes permanently associated with the person who tried to steal Christmas from sick kids and struggling families. Karen looked around at the gathering crowd. Neighbors she'd served citations to, families she'd harassed about minor infractions, children who just wanted to see pretty lights. For the first time in weeks, she saw them as people instead of rule breakers. She started, then stopped. I was just trying to maintain order. I know, Dake said, his voice gentler now. But sometimes the best thing a leader can do is admit when they're wrong. Karen stood there for a long moment, watching a little girl in a wheelchair laugh with delight as Dave's synchronized lights danced to jingle bells. The child's pure joy cut through all her anger and fear and stubborn pride. The fines are withdrawn, she said quietly. All of them. Dave nodded. Thank you. But Dave, Karen met his eyes. Next year, we're setting some reasonable guidelines for all this. I'm still the HOA president. Dave grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way, Karen. Community needs structure. It also needs heart. As Karen walked back to her house, she heard Dave calling out behind her. Hey, Karen, you know what would really bring property values up? She turned, suspicious. If the HOA president's house had the best Christmas display on the block next year. Despite herself, Karen smiled. We'll see about that, Thompson. But as she reached her front door, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Karen, this is Jessica Liu, from the State HOA Regulatory Commission. We need to discuss some complaints we've received about your community's governance practices. Please call immediately. Karen's smile faded as she realized that while her war with Dave might be over, her troubles were just beginning. Someone had been watching this whole situation very carefully, and apparently, the state had some questions about how Maple Grove Estates was being run. She looked back at Dave's festival one more time, then went inside to make a very important phone call. Karen Mitchell stood frozen in her driveway at 6:47 am, clutching her HOA violation notice like a weapon, watching in horror as 17 news vans pulled into Maple Grove Estates. The headline on Channel 7's breaking news ticker read, Local HOA pre-ESIDENT DC layer ES war on CHRS demes lighties. Help them year billion AAR, fighties base K, with 50,000 BLB space TAA sil. This cannot be happening, she whispered, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling as helicopters circled overhead. It had started so simply 3 weeks ago. Karen had been making her usual morning patrol, clipboard in hand, measuring tape at the ready, when she spotted them. Dave Thompson's house, 2247 Elm Circle, adorned with what she could only describe as an excessive display of holiday cheer. 7 strands of lights. 7. The HOA handbook clearly stated a maximum of 5 strands per residence. Dave. She had marched straight to his front door, pounding with authority. This is unacceptable. Dave had opened the door in his bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, looking genuinely confused. Morning, Karen. What's the problem? 7 strands, Dave? 7. The handbook says 5 maximum. I'm issuing you a citation. Karen, come on. It's Christmas. My kids hung 2 extra strands yesterday. Can't we? Rules are rules. She had snapped, scribbling furiously on her citation pad. You have 48 hours to comply or face escalating fines. First offense, $150. Dave's face had shifted from confusion to something darker. You're really going to fine me for 2 extra strands of Christmas lights? The integrity of our community depends on adherence to established guidelines. Remove them by Thursday or the fine doubles. That had been her first mistake. Dave hadn't removed the lights. Instead, he'd added more. When Karen returned Friday morning, his house looked like Times Square had exploded. Icicle lights draped every eave, candy cane path markers lined his walkway, and an inflatable Santa village occupied his entire front yard. This is war, she had muttered, immediately drafting a $300 fine notice. But Dave wasn't finished. By Monday, He'd somehow acquired a synchronized light display that pulsed to Christmas music broadcast on a low-power FM frequency. Cars began stopping, then parking, then forming actual traffic jams. Karen had called an emergency HOA board meeting. "This Thompson situation is completely out of hand," she announced to the 3 other board members crammed into her living room. "He's turned his property into a circus." "Karen," said mild-mannered Treasurer Bob Chen, "maybe we should just let this one slide. It's Christmas, and honestly, it's bringing a lot of joy too." "Joy?" Karen's voice cracked. "Bob, we have tour buses. Actual tour buses driving through our neighborhood. Property values will plummet. Or increase," suggested board member Linda Walsh. "I mean, we're getting national attention. My sister in Phoenix saw Dave's house on Instagram." Karen felt her eye begin to twitch. "I'm implementing emergency measures. Effective immediately, all holiday displays exceeding basic decorative parameters will result in immediate fines of $500 per day until compliance is achieved." The room fell silent. "Karen," Bob said slowly, "you can't just. I'm the president. I can and I will." That night, she had personally delivered Dave's $500 fine, expecting capitulation. Instead, she found him in his garage with his laptop, grinning like a maniac. "Karen, perfect timing. Want to see what arrives tomorrow?" On his screen was an order confirmation for $12,000 worth of commercial-grade AED displays, projection mapping equipment, and something called a festival sound system package. "Dave, what have you done? You wanted to play hardball, Karen. Game on." Now, standing in her driveway watching CNN set up their satellite truck, Karen realized she might have severely underestimated Dave Thompson. Her phone was ringing nonstop, reporters, neighbors, and disturbingly, lawyers offering their services. The worst part, Dave's house wasn't just decorated anymore. It was a legitimate tourist attraction with its own hashtag, merchandise booth, and apparently, a documentary crew. As she watched a family of 4 take selfies in front of her HOA President Lives Here lawn sign, Karen made a decision that would change everything. She was going to shut this down, whatever it took.